Jake Martinez stared at the economics textbook in front of him, but the words kept blurring together. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked his phone. It was already past midnight, and the campus library would close in 30 minutes. The coffee in his paper cup had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't afford another one. His bank account showed exactly $5.37. That had to last him until Friday when he got paid from his job at the campus bookstore. Rent was due next week, and he was already 3 days late. His stomach growled, reminding him that dinner had been a pack of crackers from the vending machine. Jake's phone battery showed 15%. He turned on power-saving mode and dimmed the screen. The phone was 3 years old and barely worked, but it was all he had. He needed it to last until he could get home and charge it. The library was almost empty now. Most students had gone back to their dorms or apartments hours ago. Jake lived in a tiny studio apartment off campus because it was cheaper than student housing. The walk home would take 20 minutes, and it was starting to rain outside. He tried to focus on the chapter about market economics, but his mind kept wandering. His parents had wanted to help with college, but they were struggling too. His dad worked at a factory and his mom cleaned offices at night. They had already done everything they could just to get him this far. Jake heard footsteps approaching his table. He looked up to see a woman in her 40s walking toward him. She wore an expensive-looking black coat and carried a leather briefcase. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she looked like she belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a college library at midnight. "Excuse me," she said, slightly out of breath. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but my phone died and I have an emergency. Could I possibly use yours for just one call?" Jake looked at his phone with its low battery and thought about saying no, but the woman looked genuinely worried, and something in her eyes reminded him of his mother when she was stressed about money. "Sure," he said, handing over his phone without hesitation. "Go ahead." "Thank you so much," the woman said, taking the phone with obvious relief. "I'll be quick, I promise." She walked a few steps away and dialed a number. Jake tried not to listen, but her voice carried in the quiet library. "It's me," she said into the phone. "The containment protocol worked, but we need to implement phase 2 immediately. The specimen is secure, but I'm worried about secondary exposure." Jake frowned. That was strange language. Maybe she was a doctor or worked for a pharmaceutical company. He had heard his cousin who worked at a hospital use similar terms. "No, the readings are stable now," the woman continued, "but we can't take any chances. I need you to activate the backup systems and run a full diagnostic on all equipment. The safety of everyone in the facility depends on it." She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "I understand the cost, but this isn't about money," she said firmly. "Lives are at stake. Do whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again. I'll be there in an hour to oversee everything personally." The woman ended the call and walked back to Jake's table. She handed him the phone with a grateful smile. "Thank you so much," she said. "You have no idea how important that call was. You might have just saved lives tonight." Jake shrugged. "It's no big deal. I'm glad I could help." The woman reached into her briefcase and pulled out her wallet. "Please let me give you something for this. I know college students don't have much money." "No, really, it's okay," Jake said, waving his hand. "You don't need to pay me for using my phone. Anyone would have done the same thing." The woman stared at him for a moment, as if he had said something surprising. "You'd be amazed how many people wouldn't," she said quietly. She put her wallet away but pulled out a business card instead. "My name is Lisa Carter. I run a consulting company that helps people solve problems. What's your name?" "Jake Martinez," he said, taking the card. It was thick and expensive looking, with just her name and a phone number. No company name or title. "Jake, I want you to know that what you just did shows real character," Lisa said. "Not many people would help a complete stranger without expecting something in return." Jake felt embarrassed. "It was just a phone call. It's not like I donated a kidney or something." Lisa smiled. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness matter more than grand gestures." She glanced around the empty library. "You're here pretty late. Studying hard?" "Yeah, I have an exam tomorrow," Jake said. "Economics. I'm trying to keep my grades up so I don't lose my scholarship." What's your major? Business administration. I want to start my own company someday. Maybe help other small businesses get started. Jake felt foolish talking about his dreams to this obviously successful woman. That's a worthy goal, Lisa said seriously. The world needs more people who want to help others succeed. The library lights flickered, signaling that closing time was approaching. Lisa picked up her briefcase. I should let you get back to studying, she said. But Jake, I want you to keep that card. I might have some opportunities that could interest you. Would it be okay if I called you in a few days? Jake looked at the card again. Sure, I guess. But I should warn you, I don't have much experience. I'm just a college student working at a bookstore. Experience isn't everything, Lisa said. Character matters more, and you've already shown me you have that. She started to walk away, then turned back. Jake, can I ask you something? Why did you help me? You didn't know me, and you clearly don't have money to spare. Jake thought about it for a second. I don't know. You looked like you needed help, and I had something you needed. It seemed like the right thing to do. Lisa nodded, slowly. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. She smiled and walked toward the library exit. I'll call you soon, Jake, and thank you again. You have no idea how much this meant. Jake watched her disappear through the glass doors into the rainy night. He looked down at the business card in his hand, wondering what kind of consulting company she ran and why she was so interested in hiring a broke college student. He shrugged and put the card in his wallet, then packed up his books. His phone was down to 10% battery now, but it had been worth it to help someone in need. As he walked home through the rain, Jake had no idea that his simple act of kindness had just set in motion events that would change not only his life, but the future of all humanity. 3 days later, Jake's phone rang while he was restocking shelves at the campus bookstore. Jake's phone buzzed while he was putting textbooks on the shelf at the campus bookstore. He almost didn't answer because he didn't recognize the number, but something made him pick up. Hello? Is this Jake Martinez? The voice was familiar, but he couldn't place it right away. Yes, this is Jake. This is Lisa Carter. We met at the library 3 nights ago. You let me use your phone. Jake remembered immediately. The well-dressed woman with the expensive briefcase who had made that strange phone call about containment protocols and specimens. Oh, hi, Jake said, looking around to make sure his boss wasn't watching him take personal calls. How are you? Well, thank you. Jake, I was wondering if you might have time to meet for coffee this afternoon. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Jake glanced at the clock on the wall. His shift ended at 3 and he didn't have classes until tomorrow morning. I guess I could meet around 4, he said. But I should warn you, I can't really afford anything fancy. Lisa laughed softly. Don't worry about that. I know a place called Bernie's Coffee Shop on Main Street. Do you know it? Jake knew Bernie's. It was one of those upscale coffee shops where a single cup cost more than he usually spent on food in a day. He had walked past it many times but never gone inside. Yeah, I know where it is. Perfect. I'll see you at 4. After Lisa hung up, Jake stared at his phone for a moment. He couldn't figure out why a successful businesswoman would want to meet with him. Maybe she needed help with something simple, like moving boxes or cleaning her office. He had done odd jobs before to make extra money. At 4 o'clock, Jake walked into Bernie's coffee shop and immediately felt out of place. The furniture was all dark wood and leather, and soft jazz music played in the background. Most of the customers wore business suits or expensive casual clothes. Jake looked down at his worn jeans and faded t-shirt and wished he had gone home to change first. He spotted Lisa sitting at a corner table near the window. She waved him over with a smile. Jake, I'm so glad you could make it, she said, standing up to shake his hand. Please sit down. I already ordered you a coffee. I hope you don't mind. Jake sat down and noticed that there were already 2 cups on the table, along with a plate of pastries that probably cost more than his lunch budget for a week. Thank you, he said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was the best coffee he had ever tasted. You're probably wondering why I wanted to meet, Lisa said, leaning forward slightly. The thought had crossed my mind, Jake admitted. Lisa smiled. That phone call you let me make the other night. It was more important than you could possibly imagine. You said something about saving lives. Are you a doctor? Not exactly. Lisa paused as if she was trying to decide how much to tell him. Jake, what I'm about to share with you is going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen with an open mind. Jake nodded, though he was starting to feel nervous. I'm the CEO of a company called Carter Xenobiology Solutions, Lisa began. We don't advertise, and most people have never heard of us. We're part of a network of organizations that deal with things the general public isn't ready to know about. What kind of things? Jake asked. Lisa took a deep breath. We prepare for contact with intelligent life from other planets. Jake blinked. You mean like aliens? Exactly like aliens, Lisa said seriously. They're real, Jake. They've been watching Earth for decades, and they're not particularly impressed with what they see. Jake felt like he was in a science fiction movie. This is a joke, right? Someone put you up to this. Lisa reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. She swiped across the screen a few times, then turned it toward Jake. The image showed what looked like a metallic object floating in space. But it wasn't shaped like any spacecraft Jake had ever seen in movies. It was too organic looking, like it had grown instead of being built. This was taken by one of our satellites last month, Lisa said. It's a scout ship from something called the Galactic Federation. They're deciding whether humanity is ready to join the community of intelligent species. Jake stared at the image. It looked real, but he knew that computer graphics could fake almost anything these days. Let's say I believe you, Jake said slowly. What does this have to do with me letting you use my phone? That call prevented a disaster at one of our research facilities, Lisa explained. But more importantly, it showed me something about your character that I've been looking for. I don't understand. Lisa leaned back in her chair. Jake, most of the alien species in the galaxy think humans are dangerous. They see our wars, our violence, our selfishness, and they classify us as what they call a Type 7 aggressive species. Do you know what they do with Type 7 species? Jake shook his head. They contain them. They build barriers around the entire solar system to make sure the dangerous species can't spread to other worlds. Earth would become a prison. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter in Jake's mouth. That's terrifying. It is, Lisa agreed. But there's something the aliens don't understand about humans, something that might save us all. What's that? We help strangers, Lisa said simply. Not just family members or people we know, complete strangers. You proved that when you let me use your phone without asking for anything in return. Jake frowned. But lots of people would have done the same thing. That's exactly my point, Lisa said excitedly. Lots of humans would have helped. But according to our research, no other intelligent species in the galaxy has this trait. They help family members because of genetics. They help allies because of mutual benefit. But helping random strangers for no reason, that's uniquely human. So, what are you saying? Lisa pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table between them. I'm saying that I want to offer you a full scholarship to a very special school, all expenses paid, plus a monthly allowance that will take care of all your needs. In return, you'll learn things that most people on Earth don't know exist, and you'll help prove to the galaxy that humans deserve a chance. Jake picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter from something called the Kepler Institute, along with what looked like a check for more money than he had ever seen. This is real, he whispered. As real as the coffee you're drinking, Lisa said. But Jake, I need you to understand something. If you accept this offer, your life will never be the same. You'll learn things that will change how you see the world forever. There's no going back to being a normal college student. Jake looked at the check again. It was enough to pay off all his debts, help his parents, and still have money left over. What exactly would I be studying at this institute? How to save humanity, Lisa said simply. How to prove to an entire galaxy that humans aren't the monsters they think we are. How to show them that our capacity for kindness toward strangers makes us valuable allies instead of dangerous enemies. Jake sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process everything Lisa had told him. Part of him wanted to laugh and walk away, convinced this was all some elaborate prank. But the serious look in Lisa's eyes, the expensive tablet with its impossible images, and the very real check in his hands made it hard to dismiss. "If I say yes," Jake asked quietly, "what happens next?" Lisa smiled. "Then we start preparing you to help save the world." 2 weeks later, Jake found himself standing in the middle of the New Mexico desert, staring at what looked like an ordinary rock formation. Lisa Carter stood beside him, checking something on her tablet. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Jake asked, looking around at the empty landscape. There was nothing but sand, rocks, and scrub brush for miles in every direction. "Trust me," Lisa said with a smile. She walked over to what appeared to be a large boulder and pressed her hand against a smooth section of rock. Suddenly, the boulder split open with a soft hissing sound, revealing a metal doorway. "Welcome to the Kepler Institute," Lisa said, gesturing for Jake to follow her inside. They walked through the doorway into what looked like an elevator, except there were no buttons. The doors closed automatically, and Jake felt his stomach drop as they descended much faster and deeper than any normal elevator. "How far down are we going?" Jake asked. "About 300 feet, Lisa replied casually. "We needed to build deep enough to avoid satellite detection." When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal something that took Jake's breath away. They were standing in a huge underground facility that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The ceiling was at least 50 feet high, and Jake could see multiple levels connected by walkways and bridges. People in white lab coats hurried back and forth, carrying tablets and strange-looking equipment. "This is incredible," Jake whispered. "And this is just the entrance level," Lisa said. "The real work happens deeper down." As they walked through the facility, Jake saw things that made his head spin. In one room, scientists were studying what looked like pieces of metal that floated in the air without any support. In another room, people were wearing strange helmets and staring at screens showing star maps unlike anything Jake had learned about in school. "How long has this place existed?" Jake asked. "We broke ground in 1973, Lisa explained, right after we recovered our first piece of alien technology from a crash site in Montana. It's taken us 50 years to build up to this level of understanding." They stopped at a classroom where about 20 other young people were sitting around. A conference table. Jake noticed they all looked to be college age, and they all had the same nervous but excited expression he imagined he was wearing. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Jake Martinez," Lisa announced. "Jake, meet your classmates." A young woman with short blonde hair stood up and walked over to them. "Hi, Jake. I'm Amy Torres. I'm from Colorado." "Nice to meet you," Jake said, shaking her hand. A tall guy with dark skin and a friendly smile joined them. "I'm Ben Clark from Detroit. Welcome to the weirdest school on Earth." "Or under Earth," added a petite girl with red hair and freckles. "I'm Nina Ross from Oregon." Jake looked around at the other faces in the room. They all seemed like normal college students, just like him. "How did all of you end up here?" Jake asked. Amy laughed. "I gave my last $20 to a homeless veteran outside a grocery store. Turns out one of Lisa's people was watching. I pulled a dog out of a burning building," Ben said. "The owner turned out to work for the Institute. I spent my spring break building schools in Guatemala instead of going to Mexico with my friends," Nina added. Apparently that got someone's attention. Jake was starting to see a pattern. "So you all helped strangers?" "That's the common thread," said a voice from the front of the room. Jake turned to see a woman in her 50s wearing a military uniform. She had short gray hair and the kind of confident posture that made it clear she was used to being in charge. "I'm Commander Elena Hayes," the woman said, walking over to shake Jake's hand. "I'll be your primary instructor during your time here." "Commander?" Jake asked. "Former NASA astronaut," Elena explained. "I was part of the team that made first visual contact with an alien vessel in 2019. That's when I learned the truth about what we're really facing." Elena gestured for everyone to sit down around the conference table. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and the lights dimmed. "Before we go any further, I need all of you to understand exactly what's at stake," Elena began. "Jake, since you're new, this will be especially important for you to hear." The screen showed an image of Earth from space. but there were strange symbols and lines overlaying the familiar blue and green planet. "This is how the Galactic Federation sees our solar system," Elena explained. "Those red markers indicate monitoring stations. They've been watching us for over 50 years, documenting everything we do." The image changed to show what looked like a courtroom, but instead of humans, the seats were filled with bizarre alien creatures. Some looked like crystals with lights inside them. Others appeared to be made of energy rather than solid matter. Still others were so strange that Jake couldn't even describe them. "This is the Federation Council," Elena continued. "They represent over 2,000 different species from across the galaxy, and they're currently debating what to do about humanity." A student Jake hadn't met yet raised her hand. "What are our options?" Elena's expression grew grim. "There are 3 possibilities. First, we could be accepted as junior members of the Federation. Second, we could be classified as a developing species and left alone for another 1,000 years. Third, we could be classified as a Type 7 aggressive species and contained." "What does contained mean exactly?" Ben asked. "They build an energy barrier around our entire solar system," Elena said bluntly. "Nothing gets in or out, ever. Earth becomes a prison and humanity never gets to explore the stars." The room fell silent. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How do they decide which category we fall into?" Amy asked quietly. Elena clicked to the next slide, which showed a complex chart with different species listed in different colors. "They use something called the altruism index," Elena explained. "It measures how often members of a species help others who aren't related to them and who can't provide anything in return." Jake leaned forward. "And how do humans score?" Elena smiled, for the first time since the presentation began. "That's where it gets interesting. Every other species in the galaxy scores near 0 on the altruism index. They help family members because of genetic programming. They help allies because of mutual benefit. But helping random strangers for no reason? That behavior is completely unknown outside of Earth." "So we score high?" Nina asked hopefully. "We don't just score high," Elena said. "We broke their measuring system. Human altruism is so far outside the normal range that the Federation scientists initially thought their instruments were malfunctioning." Jake remembered what Lisa had told him about helping strangers being uniquely human. "So that's good, right? That should prove we're not dangerous." Elena's smile faded. "It should, but here's the problem. The Federation has never encountered a species like us before. Some council members think our altruism makes us valuable potential allies. Others think it's a sign of mental instability that makes us even more dangerous." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Think about it from their perspective," Elena said. "If you were a logical alien species, wouldn't you find it disturbing that humans regularly risk their own safety to help complete strangers? Wouldn't you wonder what other irrational things humans might do?" Jake hadn't thought about it that way. He supposed that helping strangers might seem crazy to a species that only cared about logical self-interest. "So what's the plan?" Amy asked. "How do we convince them that we're worth keeping around?" Elena stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the facility's main floor. "We're going to prove that human altruism isn't a weakness or a mental disorder," she said. "We're going to show them that it's actually our greatest strength, and you students are going to be the ones to do it." Jake looked around at his classmates and saw the same mixture of excitement and terror that he was feeling. "The Federation Council will make their final decision about humanity in 6 months," Elena continued. "Between now and then, we need to prepare you for the most important test in human history." Jake woke up to alarms blaring throughout the underground facility. Red lights flashed in the hallways as he rushed out of his room, still wearing his pajamas. Other students were doing the same, all looking confused and scared. "What's happening?" Amy shouted over the noise as she ran up beside Jake. "I don't know," Jake replied, trying to remember the way to the main control room they had been shown during their first week at the Institute. They found Commander Hayes standing in front of a wall of screens, speaking rapidly into a headset. Her face was tense with worry. "Yes, I understand," Hayes was saying. "How long do we have? 15 minutes? That's not enough time to implement the full protocol." Lisa Carter appeared next to them, also looking worried. "Students, please gather around, we have a situation." Jake and the other 20 students formed a circle around Hayes and Lisa. The commander finished her conversation and turned to face them. "A Galactic Federation ship has just entered Earth's atmosphere," Hayes announced. "It wasn't scheduled to arrive for another 3 months." "What does that mean?" Ben asked. "It means the Federation Council has made their decision about humanity earlier than expected," Lisa explained, "and they're here to deliver their verdict." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Are we ready for this?" Hayes shook her head. "We've only had 6 weeks to prepare you. We planned to have 6 months. On the screens behind Hayes, Jake could see satellite images of something that definitely wasn't a normal aircraft. The ship was enormous and shaped like a crystal, with lights pulsing along its edges in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The ship is called the Eternal Harmony," Hayes explained. "It's commanded by beings from 2 of the most powerful species in the Federation. Korthak represents the hegemony, a collective consciousness that thinks individual thoughts are dangerous. Veltar represents the Zephyrian collective, crystal beings who see emotions as a form of mental illness." "They don't sound very friendly," Nina said quietly. "They're not unfriendly," Lisa said. "They're just completely different from us. They literally cannot understand why humans would help strangers without getting something in return." Hayes pointed to another screen that showed the ship landing in a field outside Denver, Colorado. Military vehicles were already surrounding the area, but they kept their distance. "The good news is that they're following Federation protocol," Hayes said. "They're not attacking or making demands. They're here to conduct what they call a final assessment." "What kind of assessment?" Jake asked. "They're going to observe human behavior for exactly 24 hours, Lisa explained. Based on what they see, they'll make their recommendation to the Federation Council." Hayes walked over to a control panel and started typing rapidly. "We've been preparing for this possibility. We have a network of observers around the world who can help guide certain situations, but ultimately this comes down to regular humans just being themselves." "What if regular humans don't act the way we need them to?" Amy asked. "Then humanity gets contained," Hayes said bluntly. "Forever." Jake watched the screens as news reports started appearing. The alien ship was impossible to hide, and within minutes every news channel on Earth was showing footage of the massive crystal structure sitting in the Colorado field. "People are going to panic," Ben said. "Some will," Lisa agreed. "But others will do what humans always do in a crisis. They'll help each other." Hayes activated a communication system that connected to Kepler Institute agents around the world. "All stations, this is Control. Operation Human Nature is now active. Remember, no direct interference. We observe and document only." Jake watched as reports started coming in from major cities around the globe. In London, people were gathering in the streets, but instead of rioting, many were offering food and comfort to frightened children. In Tokyo, volunteers were setting up information booths to help answer questions and calm fears. In New York, emergency workers were organizing blood drives in case the aliens turned out to be hostile. "It's working," Nina said excitedly. "People are helping each other instead of panicking." But then other reports started coming in. In some places, crowds were forming with signs demanding that the government attack the alien ship. In others, people were looting stores and fighting each other out of fear. "The response is mixed," Hayes said grimly. "We need something more dramatic to tip the scales." That's when Jake had an idea. "What if we don't wait for something to happen? What if we make something happen?" Hayes and Lisa turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Jake pointed to the screen showing the alien ship. "They're just sitting there, right? They're not communicating or doing anything threatening. What if someone went out there and tried to help them?" "Help them how?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," Jake said, thinking quickly. "Bring them food, water, whatever they might need. Show them that humans' first instinct is to take care of visitors." Hayes shook her head. "Jake, we have no idea what these beings need or want, and it could be dangerous." "Everything we do is dangerous now," Jake replied. "If we don't do something to show them who we really are, they're going to judge us based on news reports and military responses." Amy stepped forward. I think Jake's right. We can't just sit here and hope that random acts of kindness around the world will be enough. I'll go with Jake, Ben said. If we're going to represent humanity, we should do it together. Nina nodded. Me too. We're all in this together. Lisa looked at Hayes, who was clearly torn between her protective instincts and the knowledge that desperate times called for desperate measures. It's too risky, Hayes said finally. We don't know anything about their biology, their culture, or their intentions. But that's exactly why we should try to help them, Jake insisted. That's what humans do. We help first and ask questions later. Lisa pulled Hayes aside, and they had a whispered conversation. Jake couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Hayes shaking her head repeatedly. Finally, Lisa came back to the group. Against my better judgment, I'm going to allow this. But there are conditions. What conditions? Jake asked. First, you wear protective suits in case their biology is incompatible with ours. Second, you carry communication devices so we can monitor everything. Third, at the first sign of danger, you retreat immediately. Jake nodded. Agreed. Hayes walked over to a weapons locker and pulled out what looked like spacesuits. These will protect you from most forms of radiation and biological contamination, she said. But they won't stop a weapon if the aliens decide you're a threat. As Jake put on the protective suit, he thought about how this whole adventure had started with him lending his phone to a stranger. Now he was about to walk up to an alien spaceship and offer to help beings from another world. You know this is crazy, right? Amy said as she sealed her helmet. Yeah, Jake replied. But it's the good kind of crazy. Within an hour, Jake and his 3 classmates were in a van driving toward Denver. Through the windows, they could see the alien ship growing larger as they approached. Military helicopters circled overhead, and roadblocks had been set up to keep civilians away. But Lisa had contacts in the government, and their van was waved through each checkpoint. Remember, Hayes's voice came through their communication devices. You're not representing the Kepler Institute or any government. You're representing ordinary humans who want to help. As they got closer to the ship, Jake could see that it was even more beautiful than the satellite images had shown. The crystal surface seemed to glow from within, and the patterns of light that moved across it were almost hypnotic. It's incredible, Nina whispered. The van stopped about 100 yards from the ship. Jake and his friends got out, carrying backpacks full of supplies they thought the aliens might need: water, food, blankets, and first aid equipment. As they walked toward the ship, Jake noticed that a section of the crystal wall was starting to change. It became transparent, and he could see shapes moving inside. I think they see us coming, Ben said nervously. That's the idea, Jake replied, though his heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst. They were about to make first contact with an alien species, and the future of humanity might depend on whether these beings understood that humans just wanted to help. As Jake and his friends walked closer to the alien ship, a section of the crystal wall began to shimmer and change. Slowly, an opening appeared, and 2 figures emerged that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The first being was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It looked like a walking crystal formation, about 8 feet tall, with lights pulsing through its transparent body. When it moved, it made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The second creature was even stranger. It appeared to be made of shifting energy rather than solid matter, constantly changing shape and color. Sometimes it looked almost human, other times it resembled a flowing liquid of pure light. Are those really aliens? Nina whispered through her communication device. They're really aliens, Hayes's voice replied from the Institute. The crystal being is Veltar from the Zephyrian Collective. The energy being is Korthak from the Hegemony. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward, raising his hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The 2 aliens stopped moving and seemed to be studying the approaching humans. Hello? Jake said, speaking clearly and slowly. We're from Earth. We wanted to welcome you and see if you need anything. The crystal being, Veltar, made a series of musical tones that somehow Jake could understand as words. You approach without weapons. This is Unexpected. Why would we bring weapons? Amy asked, stepping up beside Jake. You're visitors. We want to help you if we can. The energy being Korthak flickered through several different colors before settling on a deep blue. When it spoke, its voice sounded like multiple people talking at once. Help us? We do not understand this concept. We require nothing from your species. Ben moved forward and set his backpack on the ground. We brought some things we thought you might need. Water, food, blankets in case you get cold. Veltar's lights pulsed faster, and the musical tones became more complex. Food for beings you have never met? Water for creatures whose biology you do not understand? This behavior pattern is not in our databases. That's because you've never met humans before, Jake said with a smile. We help people because it's the right thing to do, not because we expect anything back. Korthak shifted into a red color and seemed to become more solid. Our instruments detect elevated stress in your biological systems. You are afraid, yet you approach us anyway. Why? Because you might need help, Nina said simply. And because we wanted to meet you properly. The two aliens looked at each other, or at least Jake thought they did. It was hard to tell with beings that were so different from humans. We must run additional scans, Veltar announced. Your behavior does not match any known patterns for a Type 7 aggressive species. Over the next hour, more aliens emerged from the ship. Some looked like insects the size of dogs, others resembled floating jellyfish made of metal. Each one seemed amazed that the humans had approached peacefully with offers of assistance. Jake and his friends answered hundreds of questions about human behavior, culture, and motivations. The aliens seemed particularly confused by stories of humans risking their lives to save strangers. A human female jumped into a frozen river to save the offspring of another human she had never met? Asked one of the insect-like beings. What genetic advantage did this provide? None, Amy explained. She just couldn't let a child drown. But the risk to her own survival was significant, the alien pressed. This action contradicts all known evolutionary principles. Maybe, Ben said, but it's what any decent human would do. While they talked, reports were coming in from around the world through their communication devices. In dozens of countries, humans were doing exactly what Jake and his friends were doing, but on a larger scale. In Brazil, when one of the alien scout ships had mechanical problems, local mechanics worked for 18 hours straight to build a device that could help repair it, even though they had no idea what the technology did or how it worked. In Japan, when an alien became separated from its group due to a translation error, an entire neighborhood organized search parties and used social media to reunite the lost being with its companions. In Nigeria, when aliens requested a sample of Earth's art and music, musicians and artists from across the continent collaborated to create a presentation that lasted for 6 hours, all as a gift with no expectation of payment or recognition. This is highly irregular, Korthak said, its form shifting to a confused purple color. Our psychological profiles indicate that your species should be responding with fear, aggression, or attempts at exploitation. Some humans are doing those things, Jake admitted, but most of us just want to make sure you're okay. Veltar's light suddenly began flashing in rapid patterns. We are receiving reports from observation posts worldwide. The pattern is consistent across all geographic regions and cultural groups. What pattern? Nina asked. Humans offering assistance to unknown entities despite potential personal risk, Veltar explained. This behavior appears to be hardwired into your species at a fundamental level. One of the floating jellyfish aliens drifted closer to Jake. When it spoke, its voice sounded like bubbles popping. We have observed thousands of species across the galaxy. Never have we encountered beings who regularly sacrifice their own welfare for strangers. Maybe that's because you've never met the right species before, Jake suggested. Through their communication devices, they could hear Hayes and Lisa back at the Institute coordinating with observation teams around the world. The aliens weren't just testing Jake and his friends, they were conducting a global assessment of human behavior. The results are incredible, Hayes' voice reported. In every single test situation, Groups of humans have prioritized helping the aliens over their own safety or benefit. But then Korthak said something that made Jake's blood run cold. These observations are indeed unprecedented. However, the Federation Council remains concerned about your species' capacity for violence. What do you mean? Amy asked. While you demonstrate remarkable altruism toward strangers, you also wage wars against each other, Veltar explained. This contradiction confuses our analysis. How can a species be both extremely helpful and extremely hostile? Jake thought about this for a moment. It was a fair question. Humans did fight wars and hurt each other, sometimes for terrible reasons. We're not perfect, Jake said finally. We make mistakes, and sometimes we hurt people we shouldn't, but that's exactly why helping strangers matters so much to us. Explain, Korthak requested. Because we know what it's like to suffer, Ben said, understanding Jake's point. We've all been hurt or scared or alone at some point, so when we see someone else in trouble, we remember how that feels. Our capacity for violence comes from the same place as our capacity for kindness, Nina added. We feel things deeply. Sometimes that makes us do bad things, but more often it makes us want to help. Veltar's lights pulsed in a completely new pattern that Jake had never seen before. Fascinating. You are suggesting that your aggressive tendencies and your altruistic tendencies share the same emotional root. Exactly, Amy said. We can't get rid of one without losing the other. The aliens spent several more hours testing this theory, asking detailed questions about human psychology and behavior. They seemed particularly interested in stories about former enemies becoming friends, and about people who had been victims of violence later dedicating their lives to helping others. As the sun began to set, Korthak and Veltar called the other aliens back into their ship. We have collected sufficient data, Veltar announced. We must now return to the Federation Council to present our findings. What happens next? Jake asked. The Council will deliberate, Korthak replied. Given the unprecedented nature of your species, this may take some time. How long? Nina asked. For a decision of this magnitude, perhaps several of your Earth days, Veltar said. Jake felt his heart sink. Several days of waiting to find out if humanity would be accepted or imprisoned forever. Before we depart, Korthak said, we wish to express something your language calls gratitude. Your willingness to approach us peacefully has provided valuable data. We're glad we could help, Jake said, meaning it completely. As the aliens returned to their ship, Jake and his friends watched the crystal structure begin to glow brighter. Within minutes, it lifted silently into the sky and disappeared among the stars. Did we do enough? Amy asked quietly. I don't know, Jake replied, looking up at the night sky. But we did our best. Back at the Kepler Institute, Hayes and Lisa were already analyzing reports from around the world. The global human response had been overwhelmingly positive, but the question remained, would it be enough to convince an entire galaxy that humanity deserved a chance among the stars? 3 days passed without any word from the Galactic Federation. Jake spent most of his time in the Kepler Institute's observation room, staring at the screens that monitored space around Earth. Every time a satellite detected something unusual, his heart would skip a beat, but it always turned out to be space debris or a normal aircraft. You need to eat something, Amy said, sitting down next to him with a tray of food. Staring at those screens won't make the aliens come back any faster. I know, Jake replied, but he didn't take his eyes off the monitors. I just keep thinking about what happens if they say no. What if we weren't good enough? Ben and Nina joined them at the table. All of the students had been on edge since the aliens left. Commander Hayes had tried to keep them busy with classes and training exercises, but everyone knew they were just killing time while waiting for the most important decision in human history. The waiting is the worst part, Nina said, picking at her sandwich. At least when they were here, we felt like we were doing something. We did do something, Ben said firmly. We showed them who we really are. That has to count for something. Lisa Carter appeared in the doorway of the observation room. Her face was pale, and she was holding a tablet that was beeping with urgent messages. "Students, please come to the main briefing room immediately," she said. "We're receiving a transmission." Jake's stomach dropped as he followed the others through the facility's corridors. When they reached the briefing room, Commander Hayes was already there, standing in front of the large screen that dominated the wall. The screen was showing static, but Jake could hear strange sounds coming through the speakers. "Is that them?" Amy asked. "We think so," Hayes replied. "The signal is coming from just outside our solar system. We're trying to clean up the transmission now." The static gradually cleared, and suddenly the screen showed the inside of what looked like an enormous space station. Hundreds of different alien species were gathered in what appeared to be some kind of assembly hall. Jake recognized the crystal formations of the Zephyrian Collective and the energy beings of the hegemony, but there were dozens of other types of aliens he had never seen before. In the center of the assembly, a figure that looked like a tree made of light was speaking in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "The translation system is online," Hayes announced. "We should be able to understand what they're saying." "The question before this council," the tree-like being was saying, "is unprecedented in our 10,000 years of galactic civilization. Never before have we encountered a species that presents such contradictory evidence." Jake held his breath as the speaker continued. "The humans of Earth display Type 7 aggressive characteristics, including warfare, environmental destruction, and social inequality. By all standard measures, they should be classified for immediate containment." Jake felt his heart sink. This was it. Humanity was going to be imprisoned in their own solar system forever. "However," the speaker continued, "they also display behavioral patterns that do not exist in any other known species. Their consistent altruism toward strangers defies all evolutionary logic and challenges our understanding of intelligent life." On the screen, Jake could see Veltar moving forward to address the assembly. The crystal being's lights pulsed in complex patterns as it spoke. "The Zephyrian Collective has analyzed the data collected during our observation period," Veltar said. "In over 3,000 documented interactions, humans consistently prioritized the welfare of unknown aliens over their own safety and resources. This behavior appears genuine," added Korthak, shifting into a bright blue color. "Our psychological scans detected no deception or ulterior motives. The humans genuinely wanted to help beings they had never met and might never see again." A new alien that looked like a floating sphere covered in eyes spoke up. "But how do we explain their capacity for violence? Species that help strangers should not wage wars against each other." Jake watched as Veltar's lights shifted to a pattern he had never seen before. "That is precisely what makes them unique. Their capacity for empathy and their capacity for aggression share the same emotional foundation. They feel deeply, which sometimes leads to conflict but more often leads to compassion. Moreover," Korthak added, "we observed humans who had been victims of violence dedicating their lives to helping others. Their personal suffering enhanced rather than diminished their desire to prevent suffering in others." The tree-like being raised several of its branch-like arms for silence. "The Council recognizes that this decision will set a precedent for how we evaluate future species. We must consider not only what humanity is now, but what they might become." An alien that looked like a giant butterfly made of metal spoke next. "The crystalline archives show that every other species in the galaxy developed spaceflight technology before developing significant altruism toward strangers. Humans have developed this trait while still confined to a single planet. What might they accomplish if given access to galactic resources and knowledge?" Jake felt a spark of hope. At least some of the aliens seemed to be arguing in humanity's favor. "There is another factor to consider," said a being that appeared to be made of flowing water. "The galaxy faces challenges that require new approaches. Our current member species all think in similar patterns. Perhaps we need a species that thinks differently." "You mean their emotional instability could be an advantage?" asked the eye-covered sphere. "I mean their ability to care about strangers could help us solve problems we have struggled with for millennia," the water being replied. "Conflicts between species often arise because each side only considers their own needs. Humans seem capable of considering the needs of beings they have never met." The debate continued for what felt like hours. Some aliens argued that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted with galactic technology. Others insisted that human altruism made them valuable potential allies. A few suggested that humans should be monitored for another 1,000 years before making a final decision. Finally, the tree-like being called for silence again. The time has come to vote. All in favor of granting humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Federation? Jake watched as lights began appearing throughout the assembly hall. Green lights meant yes, red lights meant no, and yellow lights meant abstention. At first, the colors seemed evenly mixed, but gradually more green lights appeared. The motion passes by a margin of 62%, the tree-like being announced. Humanity will be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Federation, with full membership to be reconsidered in 50 Earth years. Jake felt his knees go weak with relief. Amy grabbed his arm to steady him, and he realized she was crying with joy. Furthermore, the speaker continued, humanity will be granted a special designation as galactic mediators. Their unique capacity for interspecies empathy will be utilized to help resolve conflicts between member civilizations. On the screen, Veltar stepped forward one more time. We wish to acknowledge the humans Jake Martinez, Amy Torres, Ben Clark, and Nina Ross, whose actions during our assessment exemplified the best qualities of their species. Jake stared at the screen in amazement. Aliens from across the galaxy knew his name. Wait, Ben said suddenly. How do they know our names? We never told them. Lisa Carter smiled, because this whole thing was planned from the beginning. That phone call I made using Jake's device wasn't to prevent a security breach. It was to inform the Federation that we had found the right humans to represent our species. Jake turned to stare at her. You mean, your kindness to a stranger literally announced to the galaxy that humanity was ready to join the community of intelligent species, Lisa explained. The Federation had been waiting for proof that humans could show genuine altruism. You provided that proof. Commander Hayes walked over to the window that looked out over the facility. The galaxy just became a much bigger place, she said, and humanity has work to do. Jake looked around at his friends, at Lisa and Hayes, and at the screens showing alien civilizations across the galaxy. 6 months ago, he had been a broke college student worried about paying rent. Now he was apparently going to be some kind of galactic diplomat. So, what happens now? Nina asked. Now we build starships, Hayes said with a grin. We learn about alien cultures. We explore strange, new worlds. And we help solve problems that have been troubling the galaxy for thousands of years. Jake smiled as he looked up at the screen showing distant stars. Somewhere out there, hundreds of alien civilizations were waiting to meet the humans who cared about strangers. It was going to be the adventure of a lifetime, and it all started because he let someone use his phone.